The Magician card in Tarot is linked to Mercury, and Mercury rules Virgo, which rules the bowels, and Mercury also rules Gemini, which rules the hands and the lungs.
I wrote you a story. It's a little bit gruesome, but I mean, hey, that's what I'm here for. Want to hear it? Here it go. How often and how deeply do you think before you permit words to exit your body? Consider the effort that you take for granted when you communicate. Speaking from your mouth is easy and often small talk. Take a moment to ruminate on the idea of talking small. It can be a necessary rest from thought and consideration, but what does it mean when most of your communication and connection with others is small? Speaking from your bowels is different. Speaking from where the monsters be. Drawing breath into your lungs to reach like hands into your guts, pulling it up, letting your throat transmute real feelings into words. Words aren't enough though, so you must use your hands, which sometimes still is an underwhelming expression compared to what lives in your guts. How you speak is how you live. I met Magnus in a train station. He was an old man by the time I met him, sitting alone, rocking back and forth, mumbling to himself. As I walked by, his mumbling became louder, loud enough for me to turn and look at him. And as I did, he patted the seat next to him. I sat. He had a story to tell me. His mumble shifted into the clear voice of a storyteller. He began to tell me about how he had started rapping when he was young, but it wasn't until he was 25 that he realized his true potential, his true magic. He had learned that if he rapped from deep down in his guts and gave his monsters some sunshine, he was able to manifest anything he or his monsters wanted. He materialized what many people would: the fame, the house, the car, a trampoline. Anything he wanted, he wrote a rap for it, and he had it. Easy. The thing about this ability, though, was that what most proverbs will tell you, he had all these things but was never actually satisfied. There's this concept called the hedonistic treadmill, and it explains how whenever you get the object of your desire, you lose interest with it fairly quickly because it's the wanting that you want. Magnus had broken his treadmill. He got everything he wanted simply by expressing the want for it. So after less time than you might think, he couldn't even want anything anymore. This feeling can make a person mad. Only wishing to want for something was not an object or a thing that could be manifested or materialized. He started to think he'd rather have spent his life wanting something and never getting it, just so he could crave again. So he did what any mad person would do. He began to make a plan. What are we gonna do today, brain? He knew he had gotten to that point by pulling his voice up deep down from inside his bowels. When he was young, he knew he had to make friends with his monsters, but the day had come when he decided to let these monsters run the house. Magnus was no longer the one making the plan. He had given them an idea and gave them free rein to run with it. That's how he explained it to me. But what he was seeming to forget was that all of our monsters that we push down deep inside, they're still us. I understand, though, how hard it is to keep from trying to make things look like they're not completely our fault. So I just nodded and let him continue. The plan was simple enough. but Magnus made sure to construct rules regarding the plan in the hopes of giving it at least a little morality. It's more like putting people out of their misery this way, he explained. His monsters complied. The rules. 1. They must be strangers, no one we know. 2. There must be a conversation, a survey, if you will. And 3. We must be sure they are wasting their lives away in a cubicle or something and have no real intentions of following their true dreams. He had his rules. He had his survey questions, which were easy to slip into small talk. Attracting people would be easy as well. He was famous for Pete's sake. The first woman was named Joanne, Jo for short. She actually did work in a cubicle. Magnus asked her many questions and listened very carefully. Joanne liked that. He asked her back to his place for a couple of drinks. She eagerly accepted. He unlocked the door and gestured her inside, in front of him. She stepped in, surely noticing that the entryway was lined with plastic. But before she could ask, her throat was being slit in a jagged, shaky line. Magnus was very nervous. He hadn't felt nervous in ages. He pulled her body into the kitchen and laid it on the granite countertop island. He had made a contraption, which was a long rod with a piece of metal along it to clasp down with, and 2 legs making it a stand. There was a handle on the side similar to a jack-in-the-box, which would turn the rod in winding circles. Magnus pulled her body into the kitchen. Okay. In winding circles. He removed Joanne's clothes and he placed the stand over her, beneath her belly button. Magnus made an incision from her ribs to her groin. He stuck his hand in and pulled out her bowels, searching for the ends. He attached the ends to his jack-in-the-box winder and wound. As he wound, he was able to see everything she had ever wanted but never dared to pursue. Her deepest desires showed up like lights as he wound, lights his monsters were fluent in. He began to take notes, getting blood all over his pen and paper. His first note was to wear gloves next time. As he began to write, the lights began to fade, as any remnant of life or energy had escaped Joanne's corpse. That was when Magnus realized this would be harder than he thought. He would have to wait to kill them until he had retrieved all of his notes. Luckily, he had gotten a few notes down before they were gone. His monsters were able to translate her dreams of being a screenplay writer and turning her favorite books into movies that those who had read the books liked just as much. She wanted a car that would get her to the mountains, but nothing specific. She wanted an apartment in the city and a secluded cabin to go right. So Magnus bought her these things. He made a movie, which was a hit. He lived out the life she had wanted until he wanted to want again. This worked for many years, at least until he was too old to hoist writhing bodies onto his countertop. He had their notes, and he realized he had more of a taste for women's desires, which was lucky because they were so much easier to get back to his house and then to lift. Sitting on that bench with me, it was obvious the only thing he wanted anymore was to get his story out and to die. As I got up to catch my train, he stopped me and said, "Always go after what you want, but make sure you enjoy the getting there, because that part is often too short-lived and wildly taken for granted." The superpower I always have wanted was to be able to read people's minds. But our minds have this cunning ability to filter out the monsters, which is why I recently decided I'd prefer to read guts, reeling out the bowels to read them like scrolls, because I think our monsters are our unfiltered truths. And when we talk small, we ignore our monsters, which makes them grow in size as well as resentment. I do not recommend acting on every monstrous whim, however, giving it the contemplation it deserves without shame builds a bond within, which is forged with gold. And that gold is welded between the cracks and the broken pieces that cut you. That is the end. Thank you.